You're far too kind. Governors, volunteers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Yes. It is again an honor to welcome you to the annual general meeting of the RNLI, and a real privilege for me to be chairing it. Once again, I hope to show you that we're in good health, pushing the boundaries of life-saving and making the best use of the funds that you raise on our behalf. To all our supporters, our volunteers, our staff, our council, and our trustees, I would simply say a heartfelt thank you. Together, we make one of the most formidable teams in the charity world. Though I'm pretty certain you already know who they are, let me introduce the colleagues with me on the stage. To my left is Deputy Chairman Sir Andrew Kuby, and to my right, our Chief Executive, Paul Boycier. Our fellow trustees and the executive team are in the front row and will support us, I hope, in answering any questions that you may have later. As we have both governors and guests in the audience, may I remind you that only governors who have yellow cards like these are entitled to vote on the proposals and resolutions. If you are a governor, please hold up the yellow card when it comes to the voting. This makes it very much easier for us to confirm whether or not the proposal is approved. While on housekeeping, could I please ask you to ensure that your mobiles are switched off? Though it can be embarrassing for you if it goes off in the meeting, it can often be much more embarrassing when we all hear your choice of ringtone. Finally, for those of you who wish to ask a question, may I suggest that we take any on the annual accounts at the appropriate time on the agenda, but please save questions of a more general nature for any other business towards the end of the meeting. We had more than we could answer at the meeting last year, so I've tried to allow a little extra time. Of course, if we still get more this year, then we can deal with them. We will ensure they'll all get personally answered in the next few days and recorded as an annex to the minutes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the first item on our agenda today is to agree the minutes of the annual general meeting on the 22nd of May 2014. We made copies of these minutes available by post on request. They've been available online, and additional copies were made available at reception today. May I ask if there are any amendments to these minutes? No? Thank you. All those in favor? Any against? Thank you. I declare the resolution carried. To save time, I'll sign the minutes later. We now turn to agenda item 2, my report. At the first annual meeting of the National Institution for the Preservation of Life from Shipwreck on the 10th of March 1825, it was suggested that the objects of the institution embraced too wide a sphere of action. Hardly surprising, given that it had only been in existence for 1 year. But even back then, these objects were robustly defended as only being limited by a lack of awareness of how one might go about saving more lives, and the lack of donations. The tenacity of those early pioneers and their stubbornness not to be diverted from their objective has influenced this institution throughout its history. The preservation of life remains the driving force behind what we achieved in 2014 and what we intend to achieve in the coming years. So this meeting is a chance to look back and ask, what difference did we make when we and the communities that we represent gave support to this charity? In an era where charities are expected to prove their value by showing clear outcomes from their work, there is no better evidence for us than the fact that last year, together, we saved 460 lives. 460 people lived on precisely because of all of you in this room, and many thousands more supported this charity. And don't forget, there's a person and a story behind every one of those 460 lives. Let me recall just one of them. Last summer on Crooklet's Beach in Bude, Cornwall, a young boy was playing on his bodyboard. The lifeguards were keeping an eye on him when he drifted out to sea, and suddenly he let go of his board. Lifeguard Joby Wolferton Brown grabbed his own rescue board, and this is what happened next.
Yeah, I'm coming, buddy. I'm coming, mate. I'm coming, buddy. You all right? Grab on, grab on. Relax, mate. You all right? Jump on, mate. Take a breath, take a breath. Come on, on you get, mate. Come on. You're all right, buddy. Spin round, mate. Spin round. Oh, come, no, lie face down like a bodyboard. You're all right, mate. There you go, buddy, as far as I can go on the board, mate. No worries. Huh? Yeah, I'll go get it in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, the thought of our lifesavers not being there, whether they're lifeguards like Joby or volunteer lifeboat crews, it just doesn't bear thinking about. But they are there, and they are ready, and that is because of you. Everyone in this room helped to give them the right kit and the right training. That is the difference that you all make. Since 1824, we have saved over 141,000 lives, equivalent to the population of Cambridge or Dundee. And we've brought ashore 10 to 15 times that number. So almost all of us are only 1 or 2 handshakes away from someone in our past or present lives who has been saved or rescued by the RNLI. However, there's another statistic that we pay just as much attention to: the number of people we could not save. Our Coastal Safety Department charts every loss of life around our coasts. It records who those people were, where they were, and what they were doing when they lost their lives. In the United Kingdom alone, there are around 170 of them every year. But if we can't save these people through rescue, what can we do to preserve their lives? That is the challenge our coastal safety team and researchers face. And they're finding answers, ways to prevent such coastal tragedies. So now, more than ever, we save life through prevention as well as rescue. But how do we measure how effective we are? Well, as I explained last year, we have set ourselves some ambitious targets. One of them is to halve coastal drowning by 2024. We need to do a great deal of prevention work to achieve this. But we must also train and equip our lifesavers to the same high standards we have all come to expect. By 2019, we aim to complete our 25-knot all-weather lifeboat fleet and to expand our lifeguard service to provide comprehensive coverage, all of which will help save more lives at sea. So today I'll explain how we have progressed towards these goals and report the impact we made in 2014. So let's begin with life-saving, the difference that our rescue service made. Our lifeboat crews and lifeguards rescued over 10,000 people last year. So in addition to those incidents where lives were undoubtedly saved, there were thousands more where we removed people from dangerous situations. Situations that could have become much more desperate if our lifesavers had not been there. Let's break the figures down a little more. Our lifeguards rescued 1,769 people, patrolling through 215 beaches during the summer season. Overall, they helped 19,252 people in and out of the water. This figure includes first aid incidents, everything from treating weaverfish stings to resuscitating people who had suffered a cardiac arrest. As for our lifeboat crews, they launched 8,462 times to people in distress and sometimes animals in distress. Over the years, we have rescued dogs, cattle, deer, horses, goats, birds, cats, ferrets, dolphins, whales, porpoises, seals, a badger, and a tortoise. In an unguarded moment, one of our volunteers told me of this last incident, but I can't find it in the records. But why do we bother with animals? Well, first of all, we care. But there is another much more serious reason. Human beings have a propensity to follow their pets and their livestock into danger. There are many cases where the animal makes it to the shore, but the owner succumbs to the conditions. So it's often better for us to go first and to go fast. Human life is the priority, and in all, our volunteer lifeboat crews rescued 8,727 people last year. If you're part of a lifeboating community, you'll appreciate what it takes to send a crew out to rescue someone. The people, the skills, the equipment, the facilities, and the sheer courage. I feel very lucky to be able to visit such communities. Last September, for example, I met the volunteers and fundraisers at Porthancline on the Llyn Peninsula in Wales. I had the honor of opening their superb new slipway station, a wonderful feat of engineering. It has all the facilities the crew need to carry out a lifeboat launch and to prepare for the next one. It was an even greater honor to present the volunteers with a vellum to celebrate 150 years of saving lives, and to listen to the broadcaster, David Dimbleby, as he named the crew's new Tamar-class lifeboat, which was partially funded by his late close friend, John Spicer. The balance for the boat and the significant sum for the station were funded by many other generous donors, and in particular, the spectacular fundraising efforts of the townspeople themselves. It was an extraordinary day because the whole community was there to celebrate what they had achieved. You could see the gratitude and excitement of the volunteers who will use all this new equipment. It's exactly what they need to continue saving lives on that stretch of coast. And as I found out, anyone who dares to leave any spillage, whether it's oil or tea, on the lifeboat station floor is in for trouble. They will have a very boathouse-proud and health and safety-conscious coxswain to answer to. The John D. Spicer was one of the last Tamars to be built, with the final one becoming operational at the Mumbles. Construction of the final Tamar slipway station is proceeding well at St. David's. Meanwhile, the first Shannon to go on station arrived at Dungeness. This was followed by Exmouth, Lowestoft, and Hoylake, plus another Shannon for the relief fleet. The Shannons continue to be rolled out to stations this year, and Loch Swilly volunteers received theirs last month. It's the first time in our history that a lifeboat has been named after an Irish river, and this is the first Shannon on service in Ireland. So it was a particularly proud day for the crew when the new lifeboat arrived. Indeed, it's a proud day for all stations when a new vessel arrives, and the Shannon is a fantastic lifeboat as its launch and recovery equipment. Let's see both in action as the Princess Royal named the Dungeness boat in May last year. The Shannon is also the last piece in the puzzle when it comes to equipping the all-weather crews with a 25-knot fleet. To meet that target by 2019 and keep our fleet up to date further into the future, we will need to build 6 all-weather lifeboats a year. And that is why we are bringing all-weather lifeboat construction in-house alongside the maintenance and refits we already carry out. Hopefully, I'll see some of you when we officially open the All-Weather Lifeboat Centre in Poole on the 21st of August. By the end of 2014, the main construction was complete. This week, the ALC team have been working on no less than 7 all-weather lifeboats, refits for 2 Merseys, maintenance on 2 Tamars, and the construction of 3 Shannons, 1 relief, 1 for Fleetwood, and 1 for Scarborough. I find it incredible that we have all that going on at the same time in our own in-house facility, a long-held ambition for the charity that is now a reality. We have, of course, been constructing our own inshore lifeboats for decades. The Inshore Lifeboat Centre on the Isle of Wight continues to produce and maintain them quickly and thoroughly. That's thanks to the hard-working staff and the continuous improvement methods that they employ. This ensured that 9 new Bleecast Atlantic 85s and 12 new D-class inshore lifeboats went on service last year, not to mention the 96 boats that were refurbished there, including lifeguard rescue craft, daughter boats, and flood relief vessels. So it was a successful year of funding, building, and delivering the right lifeboats. But as I saw for myself in Porthancline, they need the right stations to match, the right buildings to look after the craft and their crew, the right facilities for launch and recovery. It was therefore another 12 months of hard work by the estates team, who oversaw the completion of 21 major building projects, including modifications at Exmouth, Lowestoft and Hoylake to accommodate the Shannons that I mentioned, plus new crew facilities at Isla and countless smaller projects around our coasts. There's also been a demand for more lifeguard craft and facilities, especially as the service continues to expand. Last summer, we had 215 lifeguard units for the first time, and this year, that's expanding to 224. As you can see, they include several new beaches on the Wirral and up in Fife. Recruiting and training enough lifeguards is no small task. Though many return for several seasons, we don't retain all of them, as they are often at the age when they're embarking on their careers. Plus, the expansion has meant we've had to recruit new teams in new areas. And while new lifeguards already need to hold a recognized swimming qualification, they also have to meet the exacting standards of the RNLI. Just the thought of running 200 meters in 40 seconds in soft sand makes me tired. But that's the sort of fitness that we require in our lifeguards. They're also trained in rescue techniques, casualty care, and how to prevent incidents before they happen. After all, that's 95% of a lifeguard's job. And that brings me on to what a difference prevention made in 2014. Of the 170 or so people who drown around the UK coast every year, more than 2/3 are men. So in the summer, our Respect the Water campaign will again target men and ask them to take simple precautions around the water. Then there are the more specific programs. We have identified more than 40 different activities or pastimes carried out on our coasts from which people have drowned. They range from kayaking and coastal walking to angling and commercial fishing. With the help of our volunteers and other like-minded organizations, we are targeting the people at risk with community safety plans and media campaigns. For example, our researchers and coastal safety team worked out that January is the most dangerous month for commercial fishermen with boats under 15 meters. They also found that a lack of stability in fishing vessels was a leading cause of death. So we created a very specific campaign aimed at fishermen and launched it at various ports around the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. I'm very pleased to say that after seeing the campaign materials, almost 6,000 people visited our Fishing Stability webpage, which featured safety films and tips. We've always relied on volunteers to save lives, and that applies to prevention work as well. A good example of this is our education volunteers, who last year talked to over 340,000 children about staying safe at the seaside. Talking to a lifeguard down in Cornwall, I know that these school visits do work. He told me of an 8-year-old boy who persuaded his parents that they should always swim between the flags where the lifeguards patrol, because there can be dangerous rip currents further along the beach. That boy had clearly listened when a volunteer had visited his school more than a year earlier, and his knowledge earned him a pat on the back from the lifeguard. His parents were visibly shaken when the lifeguard explained the hidden dangers of where they had intended to swim. Education volunteers rely on good relationships with schools, and that's a reminder that we cannot carry out all these safety activities on our own. All our rescue work requires good relationships with other organizations. Most of the lives we save are only possible because we work with other agencies, like the Coast Guard, the RAF, the Royal Navy, the NHS, air ambulance, local authorities, the list goes on. The same goes for our prevention work. For example, we gave 3,600 children swim-safe lessons in 4 counties last year, working alongside the wonderful Amateur Swimming Association, the National Trust, and the Royal Life Saving Society. We could only deliver life jackets to more fishermen last year by working with the MCA, Seafish, the Fishermen's Mission, and many other members of the fishing industry safety group. We can only give counselling to those who need it if following rescue on the Thames with the Samaritans and Mind. We can only create a national drowning prevention strategy by working closely with the National Water Safety Forum. So as well as being a rescue organization in our own right, we are becoming a catalyst that makes a difference through coalitions and partnerships. We're doing it in the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, and we're also doing it internationally as well. You've heard that drowning is still a problem around our shores. Well, globally, it's an epidemic. By the time this AGM draws to a close, more than 40 people will have drowned somewhere in the world. Most of them will have been carrying out everyday activities like washing or collecting drinking water, and those most at risk are children. Equally tragic, but a different kind of problem, is the tragedy of overloaded vessels carrying migrants across the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. We can't ignore news like this, but whilst our hearts might suggest that we send lifeboats to help, our heads must consider this complex situation very carefully and only offer support if we are ready, appropriately equipped, and can do it safely. On the basis of the current information, we believe that sending an RNLI lifeboat independently from a wider coordinated effort is unlikely to be the most effective solution. And just as important, we are not set up to safely support such an operation. We cannot operate in the same way, for example, as the Royal Navy is doing in the Mediterranean. However, should a clearly defined role for the RNLI emerge and we can contribute safely, we will certainly try to do so. In the meantime, we're also working in partnership with others to support the International Maritime Organization in defining core maritime search and rescue principles to help tackle this tragic loss of life. The plight of migrants is a stark reminder of how dangerous the water can be. According to the World Health Organization, it is estimated that over 370,000 people drown globally every year, 9 out of 10 of them in developing countries, and many of them children, often well inland. The true extent of global drowning is much higher, and this huge figure does not include migrant drownings, transport disasters, flooding events, and such other tragedies. Yet worldwide recognition of the overall problem is severely lacking. Recognition is essential if a concerted global effort to collaborate and understand the root causes of drowning and the solutions to prevent it is ever reached. Ladies and gentlemen, our charity understands drowning prevention better than many. So do we keep our skills and knowledge to ourselves, even though simple, low-cost interventions could save thousands of lives? The answer is obviously no. We are not the kind of organization to stand by and do nothing if our intervention could save lives. That's not the kind of organization that Sir William Hillary envisaged when he established the RNLI. In case there's any doubt, let me emphasize, we are not aiming to replicate RNLI services overseas. We are working in partnerships and coalitions, helping to build awareness of the problem and the capability and the capacity of those who can make a difference in their own countries. Just one example of this is the work we've done with the Center for Injury Prevention and Research in Bangladesh, work that has brought about the country's first lifeguard club and subsequently lifeguard service. In May 2014, that service became full-time, and it now recruits and trains its own lifeguards. Last year, this lifeguard, Sukur, saved a girl from a rip current. Just months earlier, there would have been no lifeguard there to save her. Our investment in this work last year was less than 0.5%, and this year, no more than 1% of our total expenditure. That, to me, is a small price to pay if we're realizing our founder's vision that the institution would help the people of all nations wherever and whenever it could. So, whether we train lifeguards in Bangladesh, set up tidal information services in Scotland, hand out life jackets in Ireland, open lifeboat stations in Wales, or organize fundraising events in England, we have always empowered communities to save more lives. It's part of our DNA. But what about the people who make it possible? Every time we carry out a rescue or share a safety message, it's the last link in a chain of generous actions. At the start of that chain are people just like you, the people who last year helped us to raise £58 million. Every pound and every euro received from every collection, event, sale, and donation makes a life-saving difference. Then there are people who give time as well as support. We rely almost entirely on volunteers, whatever they do to help save lives in their community. And they rely on us to give them the means to carry out their supportive or life-saving work. Something that brings each life-saving community even closer together is a fundraising event. In 2014, May Day was our national fundraising day in Ireland, and we tested it in Liverpool as well. That led us to roll out May Day around the whole of the United Kingdom and continue with it in the Republic of Ireland. And the event at the start of this month went really well. Income is still coming in, but all the signs show our fundraisers really got behind it with a fantastic array of activities. It was wonderful to receive celebrity support for it too. As you can see, the high-profile supporters pulling on yellow wellies included Sir Richard Branson, Fern Britton, Ben Ainslie, and Sir Stephen Redgrave. Another new fundraising event in 2014 was H2 Only. This was the sponsored challenge in which you have to drink only water for 2 weeks. Now, you are allowed to eat. Another great success, and with a few tweaks, it's happening again this year. Those of you who fancy a go will be relieved to know the challenge has been reduced to 10 days. So that's just one weekend without your coffee in the morning or a glass of wine in the evening, or vice versa. Now, I've said much about communities working together, but we know we can do more to support them. Historically, our operations team has tended to work separately from our fundraising teams, and our prevention work has often been separated from our rescue work. And that has sometimes been reflected on the coast. But if we're going to have a more joined-up approach to community life-saving in all its forms, this had to be addressed. So our structure is changing. We now have a community life-saving department that is responsible for operational and fundraising volunteers, indeed all volunteers in the community, and furthermore is responsible for raising and spending the money it needs. It's a bold new step for the RNLI, but we're an innovative organization. It's part of our culture. We have to be that way. We have to make bold steps if we're going to save more lives. In many cases, our innovations are taking advantage of digital technology. Last year, we started accepting donations through Bitcoin, for example, a virtual currency. And we've been modernizing our business systems so that we will have one integrated system that can do everything, from managing our supply chain and payroll to supporting supporter information and reducing the administrative burden on lifeboat stations. Such projects are just one example of how we are continuously improving, never getting complacent about the way we do things. Our total savings from continuous improvement reached just over £22 million last year. Savings spread right across the organization that are audited and annually repeatable. These funds are being reinvested to build new lifeboats, new stations, and invest in our coastal safety programs. All this shows how we are making a difference through the way that we work, having the right structures and systems to save lives in the community, being more innovative and more sustainable. These ways of working help us to meet some of our very important responsibilities. Our responsibility to make donations go further by being even more efficient. Our responsibility to protect more lives by investing in our long-term goals as a charity. Our responsibility to protect our own people, whether staff or volunteers, by encouraging their health and safety, and by being more inclusive and diverse. And our responsibility to protect the environment. To give you just one example of what we're doing on that front, the Porth & Clyne Boathouse is one of 14 lifeboat stations with heat pumps installed. These are pumps that take energy from the earth or seawater. Each one saves us about £3,000 a year in energy production and the receipt of the renewable heat incentive. Other sustainable projects include our 235 Made for Life range, the life jackets recycled into bags and other products that we sell through the RNLI shops and mail order and out in the auditorium for you later today. This project has already saved us £17,000 in disposal costs, and we've sold over £103,000 worth of products. We hope to find an equally innovative solution to the challenge of recycling all-weather lifeboats as they reach the end of their operational life. We're part of a European project looking at how the materials involved could be reused in another way. That's because those that can't be sold have to be disposed of, which could be costly to the environment and indeed costly to this charity. Which brings me on to our finances. We achieved a good performance in 2014 that continued to improve our life-saving capabilities and at the same time kept us in a sound financial position. Last year, we saw our first significant increase in fundraised voluntary income since 2007, 12.2% to be exact. That was in part thanks to 3 large donations from trusts and major donors totaling £4.6 million. But it was, of course, also thanks to our fundraisers and regular supporters. Legacy income, however, decreased by 5.5 million. But given that we received our largest ever single legacy of 7.4 million in 2013, it was probably not surprising. All in all, this gave us a total income of £182 million, a wonderful achievement. I'm always amazed at the generosity of our supporters and the hard work of our fundraisers, volunteers and staff who achieve and maintain these outstanding results. Of course, it needs to continue if we are to achieve our goal of reducing drowning. Our running costs have increased by £5 million to £149.6 million as we continue to improve lifeboat capabilities, expand our lifeguard service, and grow our international presence. We were also badly affected by the severe storms in early 2014, with repair and replacement costs of around £900,000 for our lifeboat stations and lifeguard units. It would have been even higher were it not for the valiant efforts of many volunteers who often stayed out throughout the nights to help protect their stations. However, even with this increase in costs, it is comforting to know that thanks to the RNLI's continuous improvement program, costs are just 1% over 1% from the 2009 levels, despite inflation of around 14% during that 5-year period. The 32.4 million surplus of income over expenditure is absolutely essential and allows us to continue our ambitious capital program and replace all-weather lifeboats reaching the end of their operational life with newer, faster and safer lifeboats. In 2014, we spent £41.5 million on lifeboats, launch equipment and shore works, and a further £13.8 million on our new all-weather lifeboat centre, which will revolutionize how we build and maintain our lifeboats for years to come, as well as save us an estimated £3.5 million every year when fully operational. This level of capital spend is expected to continue into the foreseeable future, with a forecast of just under £300 million over the next 5 years on operational boats, equipment and properties alone. With such an ambitious program in place, it's vital that we have a solid financial platform. And I'm happy to reassure you, with total investments of £290 million and £96.9 million of free reserves available to us to cover our financial risks, we have that platform. One further piece of financial good news came from an unlikely source last year, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. In his autumn statement, he announced that the RNLI, along with our fellow search and rescue charities, would be able to get all VAT rebated on the same footing as other emergency services. That'll save the RNLI around £2.5 million every year, equivalent to 1 all-weather lifeboat every year. Credit should go to Alan Pardon and Darren Spivey for their hard work over a number of years to persuade the Treasury of the logic to treat all emergency services equally. The pleasant surprises have continued into 2015. Perhaps you have already heard about these 2 classic Ferraris, left to us by an extremely generous man. Richard Colton was a businessman who loved collecting cars and who also loved the RNLI. When he sadly passed away earlier this year, we discovered that he left us 2 cars from his collection worth several £million. And while I'm sure a few of our lifesavers would love to take them for a spin, including me, it's a happy thought that Richard's generosity will be transformed into funds that would help our crews and lifeguards save lives well into the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a broad sweep of the difference that we have made together last year. Running through all of this is a culture of life-saving in the community and continuous improvement. That extends to this event too. Earlier this year, we took some time to look at the annual general meeting and the annual presentation of awards to decide how to get the best out of both events. We know that they are the pinnacle of our annual calendar, but we also know that holding them together brings challenges and significant costs. Volunteer survey feedback made it clear that while the AGM and the APA together make one great day, we're not making the most out of either event. Only 1% of our governors, for example, are attending today, and I'm delighted you are here. But that's 1% here to cast the votes out of 32,000. And while the number of awardees eligible for our afternoon ceremony is going up, the numbers attending here are decreasing. For many of our volunteers and supporters, traveling here is just too costly and time-consuming and too much of a commitment. So we've reached the decision to split the AGM and the APA and hold separate events from 2016. By doing this, we can have an AGM that concentrates on encouraging more governors to take an active role in the important business of the shaping of the RNLI's future, while also keeping our costs down. This change in format won't affect our legal obligations. The AGM will still comply with our bylaws, regulations, and indeed the Royal Charter. Next year, the AGM will move to a new venue, and the annual awards will be presented at regional and community events. We'll be sending out correspondence in the coming months to give you more information and explain the AGM's new format. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've explained how we continue to change as a charity to meet the challenge of saving more lives. The challenge to halve coastal drowning by 2024. The challenge to complete our 25-knot all-weather lifeboat fleet by 2019. The challenge to expand our lifeguard service to a national network, and the challenge to grow our overseas life-saving work. But as I said last year, we remain independent from government. We rely almost entirely on our volunteers and supporters. We are a major maritime charity that is community-based. We have always stayed true to the vision of our founder, Sir William Hillary, and we're always working to preserve life from drowning, whether in fresh or salt water, wherever we choose to operate. We are very fortunate to have dedicated staff and volunteers, each of whom cares passionately about doing their best to support this wonderful organization. Let me close this report by recording my heartfelt thanks to all of you. This year, 460 people are only alive today as a result of your contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 3, to adopt the report and accounts for the year ended 31st December 2015. Copies have been made available prior to the meeting and at the door today. Once again, the team have made what can be a very dry document more appealing, easier to read, and hopefully to understand, and by the way, very cost-effective. In a minute, I will ask anyone has any questions and comments on these accounts. But before I do, can I just point out that there is a typographical error on page 50 in my own brief biography. It should read that I spent over 30 years with the Volvo brand, not 30 years with the Volvo board. No one could do 30 years on the Volvo board. This has been corrected on the website and as part of registering our accounts. Moving on, may I inform you that it is important for the official record of this meeting that anyone with a question uses one of the microphones held by our stewards around the auditorium. They are hopefully making themselves known now. I hope you can see them. I can, yes. Good. I would also appreciate it if you could stand, state your name and branch or station if applicable before asking your question. Are there any governors who wish to ask a question specifically on the annual accounts? terribly sorry to wander up and down like this, but I can't see a thing. Last year you were very kind to ask questions, so I desperately don't want to miss anybody out. No? Thank you. For each of our resolutions, I should point out that I will simply propose it without seeking a seconder, as is our convention. So for this first one, I propose that the report and accounts for the year ended 31st December 2014 be adopted. All governors in favour, please indicate with your yellow cards. Thank you. Any against? Thank you again. I declare the resolution carried. We now come on to item 4 on the agenda, the election of the Council. Council members are an important ingredient in the past, current and future success of the RNLI. They are influential ambassadors, talented professionals with a broad spectrum of expertise, invaluable, and dare I say it, free of charge to the RNLI, and participate in many of the committees and ad hoc review groups within the institution. They also appoint the trustees from their number. They all give a significant amount of time to the institution, for which we are most grateful. Stepping down this year are Robin Broadhurst, David Gross, Lord Iliff, Doug Patterson, and Malcolm Vincent. Malcolm is also retiring as a trustee, effective at the end of this meeting. As a former president of the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology, and chairman of our technical committee, he has made a major contribution to the design and development of our lifeboats, to the building of our stations, and to the equipment that we provide. His passion has always been to ensure both our shore and boat crews and lifeguards have the best and safest boats, building, and kit. I'm sure you would like to show your appreciation for the contribution they have all made to the success of this organization. I should say Malcolm was also very kind to find his replacement before he departed. Now to the replacements. Council members can serve up to 3 years, after which they may offer themselves for re-election. The names and short biographical details on each council member being put forward for re-election are given on the inside of the supplemental information to the notice of the annual general meeting of governors. Sort of Gilbert and Sullivan, that. Do you want me to do it again? No. Unfortunately, we did miss one off. I'm sorry to say there's been a small typographical error in the printing of the booklet in that one of our current council members, John Drake, has been omitted. However, the online version of the supplemental notice booklet is correct and has been since the May the 8th. John is Chief Operating Officer for the City of London Solicitors, Bird & Bird. He hails from Somerset and has been a council member since 1998. He was a member of our Finance and IS Committee from 1995 to 2007, a member of our Audit Committee, and served on the Trustee Board from 2006 to 2007. John was also Deputy Treasurer from 2006 to 2007 and a member of the Investment Subcommittee. We are proposing that he is elected for 1 additional year. The rest of the council members being put forward for re-election on a 1-year term, they are John Coyle, Peter Crowley, Richard Leeworthy, Norman Marwick, John Macaulay, Simon Sherrod, and Philip Wake. And for a 3-year term, they're Christopher Brooke, David Delamere, William Everard, Fiona Fell, Jeff Holt, Sir Peter Housden, myself, Mark Kerr, Robin Middleton, Clive Rand, Archie Smith, David Squire, John Whybrow, and Vicky Wright. You will also note the names and biographical details of the new council members being elected for the first time. They are John Chudley, James Graysbrook, Roger Lockwood, Ian McNaught, Mike Sturrock, and Chris Walters. These candidates have all been put forward by the Membership Nomination Committee in accordance with the bylaws. I'd therefore like to propose that all those named be elected or re-elected to the council for the period indicated. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Any against? Thank you. I'm particularly pleased you reappointed me. That could have caused a constitutional nightmare. I declare that the resolution to elect or re-elect council members, as shown on the supplemental information to the notice of the annual general meeting of the governors, is carried. We now move on to the agenda item 5, the appointment of the auditors. I'm pleased to report that Crowe Clark Whitehill LLP have signified their willingness to continue as the institution's auditors, a role that they have discharged most diligently over the last year. The trustees recommend that they be reappointed as auditors to the institution from today up to the date of the next annual general meeting in 2016. I therefore propose that they be so reappointed. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you again. Any against? No. I declare that the resolution to reappoint Crowe Clark Whitehill as auditors to the institution until the next annual general meeting is carried. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we come to item 6 on the agenda, any other business, and in particular, questions from the floor. As usual, we asked governors in advance if they had any questions they wished to raise, and this year, questions were forthcoming from Andrew Stewart, Commander Ed Featherstone, and David Jenkins. Following their questions, I'd like to take any other questions from the floor. If we do still run out of time, question forms and reply paid envelopes are available from the registration desk. Please do use them. I can assure you each will receive a response. To ensure an accurate record of the meeting, may I remind you, please, to stand and also give us your name and station or branch, if applicable. I would also be grateful if governors would limit themselves to one subject and question at a time. This should give as many governors as wish to the opportunity to ask a question. So first, I'd like to ask Andrew Stewart to ask his question.
Andrew Stewart, annual governor for quite a few years and also visits officer at Tower Lifeboat Station. Every year, the RNLI's annual operational statistics, that's number of launches, people rescued, life saved and so on, come out and are issued at around the end of January. But the most useful publication for telling the public about this, which is this one, the general fact sheet, is deferred until after the AGM. That means that it's 6 months out of date by the time it comes out, and a lot more out of date by the time the next one comes out. In 2013 and 2014, it was even worse due to hold-ups in production and mistakes. So the current one that we have available still only has figures in it for 2012. That reduces considerably its use. Please could we bring that timetable forward so that the general fact sheet, which I give out to some 1,000 or so people every year, comes out around the start of February, when the figures themselves are available. And please could we make sure that it comes out promptly so that it's as up to date as possible for practical use.
Yes. Andrew, you deserve better than that. You did warn me of this on my last visit to Tower, but I think it would be better for me to ask Angie Rook, our Business Services and Support Director, to give you a slightly more detailed answer than I have.
Thank you, Andrew. It is an excellent question. What we actually done, because we received your question in advance, is to go back and look at the timing of our publications and did that fit with our release of statistical data. And you're absolutely right, they were out of sync. That's given us the opportunity to review that, actually start to think about how we can get those two processes aligned, and I'm delighted to report to everyone today that we've been able to not only bring forward some of the publications for this year, but actually look at our whole publication timetable for next year and get them realigned. So thank you for the feedback. Thank you for pointing that out, because by that way we've been able to improve it for obviously everybody in the room as well as a much wider audience as well. Thank you.
Angie, thank you very much indeed. I would also say this is exactly what we want to have as an open organisation. We will never get everything right all of the time, and if we want to continuously improve, challenging us is absolutely the right thing to do. I'd now like to ask Commander Featherstone to ask his question.
Ed Featherstone, Chairman of RNLI Dart Fundraising Branch. Halving the number of drownings by 2024 is a laudable ambition. That target could be achieved in a number of ways. Perhaps lobbying for primary legislation, for compulsory insurance against the risk of needing rescue, on the one hand, or alternatively, a more benign educational approach. What will be the major strands of the RNLI campaign against drowning? How much will the campaign cost up to 2024? And what changes to the organisation of the RNLI and its ethos will be necessary?
That's 3 questions, Commander Featherstone. I would say one straight away before I hand you over to Lisa Harwood, our Community Lifesaving Director. There is no change to the ethos. I hope I said in my report that preserving life has always been what we do. And if you go over the last 191 years, we have adapted to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. We will not be an organization that coerces people to do things. And indeed, a number of the drownings last year were by people walking along the coast who never intended to get in the water in the first place. So I think the challenge of encouraging them to have insurance might be difficult. But I think Lisa Harwood is much better capable of answering this question for me. Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are absolutely right. We do have a world-class rescue service, and we've had that for some time. But by the time that rescue service gets called out, by the time somebody gets wet, there have already been a number of actions prior to that in the drowning chain that we probably could have addressed so that people could have not got in trouble in the first place. And the things that you've described are really good examples of that. And so, looking forward now, what we hope to do is bring our prevention, our education, our influencing, and our supervision activities up to the same level as the rescue service at the current time. What that means, though, is that we have to do 3 key things over the next few years. So the first thing that you'll see are some quite hard-hitting prevention messages, some campaigns now. And you've seen already in the Chairman's report, Respect the Water. That's a little bit like the Think campaign or the Fire Kills campaign that you will have seen by fire and rescue services across the country. You asked about our ethos. We're often very polite and very respectful, and I think we're going to try a little bit more hard-hitting narrative photographs in our campaigns now, so you'll see that. So it will be a slight shift, and we'd welcome your comments on that. The other thing that we will do, as well as that campaign, is to start looking at risk in communities. So where we have water-based activity in communities that is high risk, and we know that there are some significant things that we can do, some opportunities that we can try, that we can optimize to try to bring that risk down. We will start to do that too, through education, through influencing, and through supervision. And the third thing that we will do is start to empower and activate communities. And again, you mentioned whether that's lobbying, whether that's talking to people about improving infrastructure, or whether that's taking action themselves. We will be working much more with communities to identify and work on their own problems. Now, cost. This year we have budgeted 3.2 million in addition to our usual operational budget for those prevention activities, to bring those prevention activities up to the standard of our rescue service. We'll monitor that this year. We'll look at the impact and we'll see exactly what happens as a result of that activity. We have budgeted in future years up to an additional 8 million if that activity is proven to have an impact. So we'll see, we'll monitor it this year, and we'll wait and see. And to echo the Chairman's comments on ethos, the one other bit of our ethos that I think we will see benefit from this approach is our volunteering ethos. This organisation has volunteers at the heart of everything that we do, and I think by offering more opportunities for people to get involved in our influencing our education and our supervision activities, we'll see more volunteers, we'll see a more diverse type of volunteer with different skills, and I think for the organisation that can only be a good thing, and it can make us more sustainable.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Commander Featherstone. Mr. David Jenkins has a question.
David Jenkins, Aberystwyth Lifeboat Station, West Wales. My question concerns communications. It's in two parts. One, when is the RNLI going to stop using business speak and acronyms and use plain Queen's English, which is much more understandable and efficient? The second, there appears to be concern, well, there is concern on the coast that some departments within headquarters in RNLI don't speak to each other. As a result of this, we lost considerable funding in Aberystwyth because of lack of communication with a donor, and we hope that this never happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. On the first point, I think we will do everything we can to remove business speak. If I'm responsible for it, I apologize. It sometimes bleeds into stuff that shouldn't come out. We should win an award from the Plain English Speaking campaign. I think that would be a good idea. But we will work hard on that. On this second element, I tried to say in my report about working together. I think you've been involved for something over 50 years. I've only been involved for 25. I think it's always been a problem in life, and particularly today. Communication breeds the need for more communication, and there are different media through which you can communicate. We need to improve. We do need to improve. If you'll accept that from me, I would appreciate it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, thank you. Now, can I take any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Thank you very much for taking my question. My name's Sheena Taylor. I'm a fairly recent governor with a lifelong connection to lifeboat stations in the north of Scotland. I'll read the question that I submitted.
Please do.
Given the present-day configuration of fewer Coast Guard stations covering larger areas than formerly, how confident is the RNLI that Coast Guard personnel operating in these stations have adequate local knowledge of the whole area covered to enable them to contact the most appropriate RNLI station to deal with an emergency? Would a survey of opinion of all involved, RNLI lifeboat crews, shore stations, Coast Guard personnel and other relevant parties be a productive initial method of investigating this issue? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to hand over to George Rawlinson, our operations director. The only thing I would say to you, for the first time in my life last week, I was in a boat. I don't know if you saw the power boat that hit a boy and overturned. I was the first boat on scene and talked to the Coast Guard. They were impressive, and that's a new centre. They were really impressive at coordinating the event. But I'll get George to give you a much more detailed answer.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Our relationship with the Coast Guard is really, really important. And a part of their programme, which they're undertaking at the moment, is to make better use of their resources through investment in communications equipment and through how they manage their resources and manage demand around our coast. But an important part of that is about local knowledge, and they've got the opportunity to invest locally in their coast rescue teams and their structure and work with us in that investment to make sure that local knowledge is not lost. We're working closely with them in that respect, and that local liaison is crucial to making sure that the local knowledge held by the lifeboat stations is transferred locally and up the chain of command to the new operations centres. By working so closely with them and developing that relationship, our survey is in actual fact continuous, and it's happening right now and well into the future. And through our feedback and dialogue with them, we'll make sure that that local knowledge is not lost.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? There's a gentleman over on the right-hand side.
Terry Coombs, Rochester area. The nearest facility to me is the lifeboat museum in the Chatham Dockyard. The question, you mentioned the statistics, you mentioned also the tragic news in the Mediterranean. It's not an area we would get involved in, but those events in the Med, unsound boats, flimsy boats, hundreds at times of individuals in need of rescue, but the capacity of the lifeboats dispatched, and should this event start to occur near UK waters, especially in the Channel, what happens when the number of the individuals needing rescue overwhelms the capacity for survivor space in the boats?
That is a challenge that we have discussed, and I think I'll ask George again to give us your view, George, on mass rescue. I would assume is your point, yes.
Thank you. Much is being said about this complex topic, and the word complex has been referred to already. I think in terms of the local search and rescue effort, whether it's in the Mediterranean or elsewhere, depends on how organized and prepared the services are to deliver their services. And certainly likening mass rescue operations to what, say, our level of preparedness in Northern Europe would be to deploy smaller rescue vessels to transfer a larger number of casualties to a parent vessel. And when we think about what's being deployed in the Mediterranean at the moment, that sort of technique should prove to be effective in dealing with a large number of people when a small vessel or a transfer vessel may start to become overwhelmed by the number. So mass rescue in general is something very closely considered by the International Maritime Rescue Federation, with whom we work closely, and has been previously mentioned, we're continuing to monitor this situation very closely and to see what we could do, if necessary, to help matters along.
Thank you, George. One more.
Thank you. Glyn Hayes. I'm the Volunteer Lifeboat Press Officer for Weston-super-Mare Station and on their fundraising branch. And I'm also, amongst other things, an adult presenter. Now, you talked about the education presenters, and there's quite a good setup for the education presenters throughout the RNLI. Yet you also talked about the fact that a large number of the people drowning are men. Now, I'm the sort of person who goes and talks to men. Yet I'm virtually ignored in that particular respect by the RNLI. I've been an adult presenter for about 8 years. I think in the last 4 years, the only contact I've had from the RNLI was to offer me a new name badge, which in itself took 3 years to arrive. Can we please realize that there are people like me talking to adults who we need to prevent against? Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we've done an incredible job in our work in schools. We need to replicate that work when you're talking to adults. Thank you, sir. I believe, it's time. If you're quick, please fire away. Oh, well, we won't be quick now, but that's our fault.
I'll try and be quick. Am I being heard? Yes. Excellent. Good afternoon, Clive Buckley. I'm the Chairman and Secretary of the fundraising branch in Solihull in the West Midlands. Can I first of all thank Lisa for very admirably answering by phone the 2 questions I earlier raised by email. But I'm asking a question now because this is something that's only very recently cropped up, and it regards the new resource custodians. And I don't think that this has got off to a particularly good start. As we all know, there is a network, if we can call it that, of people who very kindly agreed to store various large fundraising items. The one that's nearest to us, if you can call it near, apparently at the moment has 1 flag, 1 Stormy Stan and part of a gazebo. Luckily, we haven't as yet had to request any of these items, but apparently we're going to be out of luck because I believe that these coordinators have been told that they will not release any items to any branch that is more than 25 miles away. I'm afraid our fundraising branch is 46 miles away from our so-called local resource custodians. And looking at the list, I fear that many branches may be a greater distance by some margin than we are. I don't really think this is good enough. I'm hoping that the network is going to be increased, but I would very much appreciate a response, please. Why do we have to go so far to get resources which used to be sent by courier, as far as we're concerned, without any problem at all? Thank you.
We're always trying to improve what we do to support our fundraisers. That was rather a technical question for me to answer. What I propose to do is we will give you an answer. It will be attached to the minutes. We'll be in touch and send you details of whatever the appropriate answer is in the interests of time now. So thank you. I believe Mr. Mike Roberts, chairman of the Portishead Lifeboat Station Management Group, would now like to say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you heard, I'm from Portishead, which I believe, near Bristol, which I believe is the newest lifeboat station in the RNLI fold. We were previously an independent lifeboat trust for nearly 20 years. We've been in our wonderful new building, thank you very much for it, for about 1 month, and in that time we've had 4 shouts so far, in fact. Now, it seems to me that the recipe for establishing a lifeboat station needs a number of ingredients, and I'd like to mention just 3 of those very briefly. The first, of course, are the volunteers. Without the thousands of volunteers across the RNLI, whether that's crew, fundraisers, officers, administration, obviously nothing would happen. The second is the community in which we operate. And I don't mean that a lifeboat station happens to sit in a community. I mean that the lifeboat station is a part of the community. Not just supported, but in a very real sense owned by the community. The third are the significant donors who make every station financially viable. We were fortunate to have some very significant donors for the new Portishead Lifeboat Station, and I met our largest donor about a year ago, and I asked them, first of all, have you or one of your family been rescued by the RNLI? No, they said. So, have you had a connection with the sea? No, they said. So, why are you considering donating to the RNLI? And the answer was very interesting. We've looked at many different causes and charities across the country. Most are simply profligate in how they operate. Then we looked at the RNLI and were impressed by how much of the finances to go to support the front line. And as a result, they decided to make a very substantial donation. Volunteers, the community, donors, these exist because of the ethos of the organization, in my view. The reputation of the RNLI, its brand, if you like, is second to none. And that is set up, it's created by the leadership that is given to the organization. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to propose a heartfelt vote of thanks to the RNLI's chairman, the trustees, the directors, and the staff, whose wholehearted commitment and leadership they give to our charity. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Welcome aboard. That brings us to the end of the annual general meeting. The next annual general meeting is proposed for the 19th of May 2016. We will confirm this to all our governors in the future through the Lifeboat magazine and on our website. May I say thank you to you, not just for your attendance at this meeting, which makes it all worthwhile, but also for your unstinting efforts for the RNLI. They are indeed appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making this fun for me as well. It is much appreciated.